What's going on, voiceover warriors and keyboard ninjas? This is the Oreo Monster welcoming you back to Logic.band. It's a website full of tips, tricks, and tutorials for blind Logic, VoiceOver, macOS, and GarageBand users. If you haven't yet, type Logic.band into your web browser, hit return, and when you land on the page, go ahead and sign up for the mailing list so you can get a free Getting Started with Logic course. Today, I got something special for you guys. I'm talking to Andre Louis, the guy that knows everything there is to know about Komplete Kontrol, or at least so it seems at times. And as I am not a big Komplete Kontrol user, I figured we'd get someone who's a bit of an expert on here to talk through things, get everybody up to speed, and hopefully I'll learn a thing or two from this. As this will probably be a long chat, I'm going to go ahead and put links to the different topics we discuss in the description below as chapters, and I'll also put links to everything that we talk about as well, different websites, different products, different resources. So definitely explore the description for this one. So Andre, welcome to Logic.band.
Thank you. First time having me here, so nice to be here.
Yeah, we've known each other for a while through the VO Logic WhatsApp group and just the community in general.
That's right.
We did the Logic thing previously for IC Music.
Yeah, that's true. We did. That was good.
You're kind of the person that got in on ground zero of Komplete Kontrol. You want to tell us a little bit about how that all came about for you?
It was very strange how it actually came about. My wife saw something on Facebook and she saw this post from Tim Adnett. Tim Adnett was then, and still is, like a big boss in the Komplete Kontrol world. But he was less of one then. And he'd put a post out saying, we're looking for some beta testers to come into London office and do some accessibility testing because we think we have a product that can work. Kind of paraphrasing. Right. So she said, follow up with this because this could be big news. And so I wrote an email back to the email address. I didn't hear much back. But then a few weeks later I did. And it turns out actually that there was some cross wires going on in a few places. Sally Zimmerman, who was then head of RNIB's music division, put my name forward after having seen this post as well and told Tim to email me. So it wasn't until about a year and a half later when we sat down to talk about how we met that this all came out. So he didn't get my email, and I did get his email. So I thought he was responding to me, and he thought, well, I don't know, because I responded to him straight away, and then I came to the office. It was all a bit weird. So I remember the day very vividly. On May, I don't remember the date, but I remember the day. It was May of 2016, and I took a cab to this office, not knowing anything about what to expect, literally nothing. They kept it super under wraps. And I walk into the office, and I sit down at what was then an S88 Mark I, and they say, right, we've made essentially a talking keyboard. And I was like, how the hell? So they showed me how to quickly use it, quickly trained me on the buttons and said, right, now you know how to do that. Load a product. So I hit the browse button and I turned knob 2 as you do, on the S series you do. And it was giving me all this list of products. And I was scrolling through and I just said, right, what do I do now? And they said, well, click the big dial in and I could play this thing. And it was just like, it's hard to explain until you've done it at least once. And then it becomes mundane. And I feel like now I've kind of taken for granted, I've forgotten the joy of being able to do that independently. But it was so amazing back then.
Yeah, it was truly a massive game changer as far as giving the blind audience access to a lot of these just industry standard sounds and synthesizers and samplers, quite frankly. Battery and Kontakt are used as the engine in a lot of third-party libraries that we just didn't have access to. I can only imagine what a moment that must have felt like for you, someone who loves sounds, who've been playing with synthesizers all their life. You're a keyboard player. Jazz pianist, right?
I think I probably had that open mouth emoji right over my face because I just didn't know what to think or do from here. I was like, wait, I can play these drums that sound better than any hardware I had access to at the time, and all these pianos and these orchestral libraries. I mean, what is this?
Right.
It was an experience unlike anything else that I can remember, really. And now, of course, I own so much of this stuff, and I think I've become complacent because I'll get a new library, I'll expect it to work, I'll load it, and maybe some of that joy is lost. And actually talking about it with you has made me bring it back a bit, you know? I realized that we shouldn't really take anything for granted as such, but this is still a thing.
In fairness, one of my criticisms has always been that, they haven't really done too much since that big initial moment to improve things or add new features. Obviously, the big feature they added was, being able to get your parameter values after adjusting things. But there's some other stuff like, multi-out and drums and stuff like that I wish could be taken care of, and just having access to some of the deeper settings. But that being said, it hasn't slowed you down. It hasn't slowed down a lot of people in the community from just taking advantage of the native instrument stuff, but also the third-party libraries.
This is it. So I can talk about multi-out and things like this, and maybe I can shed some light on it. So if the parameter is not automatable, the keyboard cannot do anything with it.
Right.
So it's not their fault necessarily.
I understand that.
I'm not an apologist, but I think people will ask this and have asked this. And I think it's something that we should talk about.
Right.
So if a parameter is not automatable, then the keyboard cannot and will not be able to see it.
Right.
So what we really need, more than NI to do anything necessarily, I mean, they should, but it's everybody to use an accessible interface, whether that's Juice or some version of Qt, that we could all access and then set our own multi-out.
I also think that what you just described would make it very, very usable for people to also be able to take advantage of some of these things without having to make the purchase of a Komplete Kontrol keyboard at first as well too. So it kills two birds with one stone. I guess what I should say is my criticism is more that they seem to keep relying on the keyboard being the gateway for us as opposed to improving the accessibility overall.
Well, I think it's safe to say that if you've seen the Guitar Rig 6 interface, which is starting to become accessible, just starting, because they're testing on a product that is not necessarily mission critical for a lot of people. It's cool, but you could live without it. So they're testing this kind of accessibility functionality on that. So I'm sure I can safely say that if they're testing it on that, they'll be testing it on other things that we use. So there is a potential for Komplete Kontrol's interface to be accessible without the keyboard at some point in time. I can neither confirm or deny anything to do with it, but the fact is, if they're doing that, then surely, there's stuff in the future that would make that sense.
Right, and that makes perfect sense. And Guitar Rig is the perfect interface to test that with, because outside of using it as an effect on a synth, that's one of the major plugins you do get with Komplete Kontrol that you're least likely to use as a Komplete Kontrol plugin, and be a lot more useful as an insert directly in an audio track in Logic, for example.
That's right.
Makes perfect sense. That's where they're starting things with, and look forward to see what they come out with in the future and where this goes in the future.
Well, that's it. And the whole SoundWide thing has just happened, so people new to this, Native Instruments are joined with a few other companies now. Isotope, Brainworks, oh gosh, there's a few others I can't remember.
I believe it's just those three: Brainworks / Plugin Alliance, Isotope, and Native Instruments, which, by the way, I'll put a link in the description. Plugin Alliance and Isotope and Native Instruments is giving away a massive bundle of free plugins to celebrate this. Well worth it to get your hands, especially the Plugin Alliance Brainworks bundle.
And that is until April 26, 2022, so if you happen to watch this afterwards, you missed out. There's a lovely Oberhausen synth in there, which is, again, NKS ready, and I didn't expect there to be any synths available. I was just expecting plugins, so it was like a nice, ooh, cool, I'm playing with that.
It's the only Plugin Alliance synth I own because it's the only one that's NKS compatible.
And so you grabbed this bundle. Are you happy with this? I haven't looked at any of the plugins yet, but I know that there'll be a use somewhere down the line.
The Focusrite console is probably one of my favorite consoles that they make. It's a very utilitarian console. A lot of consoles is just maybe EQ compressor, maybe a gate. This one's also got a de-esser in it. And it's really, really flexible how you can use it. It will probably require checking out a YouTube video or watching some tutorials. If you guys are interested, I can do a tutorial on that. Let me know in the comments below.
Do one, actually, because I would like an equivalent of Dan Worrell, but for Logic users, because we have just as good stock effects as Reaper. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So I'd love that.
I'd argue Logic, some of them are better, but
I would argue that too, to be fair.
Especially when you talk about the compressor and the way the channel EQ works by comparison.
I love the stock Logic compressor.
Yeah.
No one can tell me any different. It's so usable.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the emulations are just the icing on the cake on top of it, so... Yeah, no, I'll definitely look at that. The saturation and the master and compressor that's in there is also top notch. I've been loving the Ampeg bass amps on bass lately. If you've not played through an Ampeg on any of your bass. Like I know you're a big bass fingers fan, Andre.
Oh my goodness, I love bass.
And bass slapper. Turn off the amp sims in there and run it through an Ampeg one of these days.
We'll do that.
And get back
because
to
they
me.
gave us one Ampeg plugin.
Yep. There's an Ampeg in there. If you want the bottom end, use the 810 cab. If you just want a little bit more mid-range growl, use the 410 cab or something else that's in there.
This is all good to know, like hints and tips. I love this stuff. Definitely gotta check that out.
You've probably played more with the Oberheim synth than I have at this point. And then you get Isotope Neutron Elements, which is kind of like Ozone Elements. It's I think 4 modules from Neutron and that's like a mixing suite. So I think it's an EQ, a compressor, a saturator, and transient designer. Don't quote me on that. And then you probably know more about the Play Series synth that's included.
Play is good. Every Play Series synth that I have is good because they're sort of out of the box, ready to play sounds. You need something quickly, you just jump to hybrid keys if you need a keyboard sound. If you need something a bit weird, Ethereal Earth is good. If you want sort of an analog sound, Analog Dreams is good. That's what I like about them. You don't really have to customize them that much. And I think that's why the Play Series really shines.
They're good for getting you up and ready and going with a certain vibe, sound, feel, etc. really quickly.
And that's no bad thing.
Definitely not. And I think that's one of the advantages with the Logic library is it saves you a lot of time. There's a lot of really, really good starting points in there.
Oh, no doubt. Alchemy is a beast.
Yes, exactly.
It's as good as any complete synth out there.
Yep. So let's back up and go back to the beginning here. So let's talk about the Komplete Kontrol ecosystem. Can you give us a brief overview of how it works? What's included? We've kind of alluded to the talking keyboard you said when they brought you into the office. So kind of walk us through the set, what the basic setup is and what's included.
So I suppose prerequisites for Komplete Kontrol would be, at least for blind people, if you're sighted, you can skip the keyboard, but everything else is the same. You need the Komplete Kontrol plugin. You need a DAW to run it in, although you can run Komplete Kontrol as a standalone app if you want to. Mm-hmm. But then you won't be recording anything or sequencing anything in it. So my advice is just use a DAW, call it a day. And that will connect to a bunch of your instruments. Now, it's very interesting because Komplete Kontrol is a bit like, a dashboard of your car. Mm-hmm. You don't have to, for example, get out and change your wheels every time you switch from tarmac to gravel to asphalt. Komplete is the same thing. You don't have to load Kontakt and load a sound in Kontakt and then switch to Reactor and load a sound in that. You don't even have to care what is loaded under the hood. Komplete Kontrol is actually doing all of that for you.
Right.
So I can switch from Omnisphere to this BX Oberhausen synth to Kontakt to anything in the middle. And a lot of people don't even know what synths they're using. Mm-hmm. It's just there and they've got access to all the presets. So Komplete Kontrol could be considered to be the sort of the wheels of your car and you're just using it to drive down the roads of your sounds, if you will.
Right.
Odd analogy, but that's kind of how it feels.
So essentially, as a blind person, you'll need to pick up one of the Komplete Kontrol keyboards. That includes a software package of some kind. Komplete Start with the A series.
And the M32.
Right. And Komplete Select, which is the first paid tier, is included with the S series keyboards, right?
Yeah, and I forget the sizes of all of these, but Native have a nice table on their website that explains all the different sizes. I think Komplete Start is around 6 to 7 gigabytes now.
Right.
And of course, there's this new tier, which I have not investigated, called Komplete Now, which is a monthly subscription package, which comes with new things every month.
Okay. Yeah, I've not looked at Komplete Now yet. If you do check that one out, definitely let me know what you think of it. So other than Komplete Now, there's Komplete Start, which is the free version anyone can use with or without a Komplete Kontrol keyboard. Unfortunately, as blind users, we'll need the keyboard to even use Komplete Start. Komplete Select, which is the first paid level up. Komplete, which is first pro level paid option. Komplete Ultimate, which is a lot more cinematic sounds thrown in on top of Komplete. And
Komplete Ultimate Collector's Edition,
which is top of the line, everything plus the kitchen sink, and I think we found a few extra synths we forgot about under the couch.
Yes, and loads of expansions. So if you're into electronic music and everything, there's battery expansions for weeks, not even days. I have had Komplete Ultimate Collector's Edition since version 12, right? Version 14 is coming out this year, and I have not even been through all of the expansions I have. That should tell you something.
And I think that's something important for people to remember is Komplete's a lot to cover on its own. Like I said, Komplete Start and Komplete Select is very minimalist. But once you hit Complete, there is so much stuff in there you could get lost for years. And that's before you hit Complete Ultimate and Complete Ultimate Collector's Edition.
That's right. And I think it's one of the biggest flagship collections out there, I think.
I believe so too. So I'd advise people to kind of start small and work your way up over time as you get into it, because it can get quite overwhelming and quite a lot to explore, as Andre stated. So you need to get the keyboard. The keyboard comes with one of these software packages. What's the setup process like? Once you get a keyboard, you order one, you get it home. What's the process like from there?
So you will take the keyboard out of the box. In the box with the keyboard, and also on the back of the keyboard, is a serial number. It's on a card, and it's also on the back of the keyboard. So if you feel like it, or if you have access to some working eyes, you can get that read to you, or you can use Ira or even Seeing AI or Envision to read that serial, because they're very well printed, and everything I've ever tried to read serials with has always worked.
Same.
So you need that, and then what you need to do as well is download from Native Instruments website this app called Native Access. Now, depending on when you hear this, you might be using something called Native Access 2. But you won't know it because it will just be renamed Native Access. Native Access on the Mac is very accessible, and on Windows is a bit hit and miss. However, Native Access 2, if you see it, and you'll know when you do, is very web-oriented. So if you see it on Windows particularly, every screen reader is going to love it. You won't just be forced to use a narrator like you do at the moment. And on Mac, again, you can just enable QuickNav and single key letter QuickNav and just use links and headings and things. It's a different interface entirely. Complete now, you'll get Native Access 2 by default. The rest of us, at least for now, we just get the old one.
So Native Access 2 that's included in Complete now will come to everyone else that's not using the subscription plan.
That's right.
Gotcha.
You can already download it if you feel brave from the website directly and have a play with it, and it will interface with all of your stuff. So you do need a Native Instruments account, which you can make from Native Access 2. I think it will take you back to the website to do that. And you log in, and once you've done that, you will be clicking on the Add a Serial button and pasting in that serial that you saved earlier. Once that's done, we will then visit the Not Installed section, and you will install, hopefully, if you've got room anyway, all the products that you've got there.
Right.
Now, one question a lot of people ask is, can you install this stuff to an external hard drive? And of course, the answer is yes. But my advice is to only change the content to the external drive. Do not change the applications folder, because apps are just special. You know, they should stay internal.
They want to stay internal. But the content, which is like the samples and the stuff the synths are pulling from to generate their sounds, that's fine to put on an external hard drive.
Absolutely.
Right.
Now, in 2018, when they flew me out to Germany to NI, proper HQ, not the London one, it's like the baby one. The big one is in Germany because that's where they're based.
Right.
We gave a talk on this whole accessibility from A to Z, you know, door-to-door type thing. And they would love to have an accessible serial number, you know, basically so that we could just get on with it and do it ourselves. But that hasn't managed to kind of surface yet. Doesn't mean it isn't going to. We're always in talks trying to better these things.
And of course, that's something I imagine is tricky, because while you want to make it accessible to us, you also don't want to make it easy for fraud as far as people ripping off serial numbers.
I think it probably is. And I mean, of course, a lot of these keyboards have been printed up in warehouses for a long time. So if they change the process, say tomorrow came out with a whole new one, the keyboard that you buy is 99% likely not to be the new one.
Exactly.
So,
it could take a year before one of those keyboards land in your hands. They're going to ship their current stock to dealers first before that new stock starts making its way out to dealers.
That's it.
So essentially, you get the keyboard, you get the serial number, whichever method you use, and you go to Native Instruments website, create an account, download Native Access, sign in, and plug in your serial number, and then that will prompt you to download, once again, as we said earlier, if you have a A-series keyboard, which includes the M32, it will prompt you to download all the things that are included in Complete Start, and if you put in an S-series serial number, it'll prompt you to download everything that's included in Complete Select. Now, when you buy your keyboard too, depending on where you bought it, you also have the option to buy it with a larger package, say Complete or Complete Ultimate, etc., at that time. At any point in time, though, you can also go to the Native Instrument website and purchase an upgrade as well.
Absolutely. Now, before anybody runs off and does this, I would highly advise you wait until June, because every June, without fail, ever since I've been interested in the Native Instruments ecosystem, there's been this Summer of Sound sale. And I think most things can go as high as 50% off. So please don't rush out and buy in the middle of the year.
That's usually when I upgrade. You'll have the opportunity to stay at the same level, so you can go from 13 select to 14 select, or you can go from 13 select to 14 complete. So you can upgrade to the new version, or you can upgrade to the new version and the new level, but I do believe it is 50% off.
You know how every 4 years is an Olympics year? Every 2 years is a complete year. It's been 2020 when the last complete version hit, so it's 2022 now. That means we will be getting complete 14 this year.
Probably in November of this year. From what I remember, the new versions usually came out in November timeframe.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, around like Black Friday timeframe. The sale is June. The sale on everything is usually June. What happens is you'll upgrade from like 12 to 13 in June, and then like November is like version 14, and you're like, do I want to wait till June or do I want it now?
You're absolutely right. I forgot about that.
We've given you the hints. It's up to you how long you want to wait to upgrade when November rolls around, because June might be the big summer sound sales. Keep those dates in mind if you're not in the Komplete Kontrol ecosystem, or if you're in it and you're looking to update. So we talked about the keyboards for a little bit, and we mentioned A series and S series. So can you tell us about the differences between the A and S series? If I'm not mistaken, I believe the A has a 25, 49 and 61 key version, and then you also have the M32, which is a 32 key keyboard.
And the M is mini. They're really cute, the M32. Such nice little keys.
It is the smallest of the bunch. The A25 is actually bigger than the M32, believe it or not.
Yes, it is, and it's funny.
Those are the 4 keyboards that are part of the A series: the A25, A49, A61, and the M32. So can you tell us a little bit about those keyboards and what the differences are?
Okay, well, all the A and M series are exactly the same in terms of usability and functionality. The only difference is that the M32 have, instead of pitch and mod wheels, they have pitch and mod strips.
Right.
Which are little touch areas to the left of the little mini keys, which are cute, by the way. You can tuck it under your arm and throw it around, and it's just
it's so light and portable.
It's funny because I saw that once and I thought this is going to be a toy to play, and it's not. It's actually very nice.
Yeah, I was surprised how nice it was to play too, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but apart from that, you get that, and now all of these keyboards have, full access to the complete ecosystem, full accessibility features. They have one jack on the back for your sustain pedal. They have a Kensington lock feature because they're so ickle that you could steal it. And they all have the exact same button layout.
And it's a standard USB port. They have not switched to USB-C or anything like that as of this recording. No. So all the keyboards have a standard USB port on them.
A lot of people think they don't come with a cable in the box. They do. They're just sometimes hidden.
Yep.
So if you're blind and you're getting one of these keyboards and you think, I haven't got that cable, you do. You just need to really look hard in that box.
Yep. It's buried in there.
Usually like a recessed panel or something. It's very odd. And then the S series now, because people often ask, what's the difference between the S and the A series? So let's break that down. The S series has aftertouch, where the A series and M does not. The S series has 2 dual color screens next to each other, which if you're completely blind won't bother you, but if you're partially sighted, you might find enjoyable to look at the artwork and some of the controls as well. So, not to be discounted as well. And if you're on stage, by the way, an S series looks awesome. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me at gigs and said, what is this keyboard? It looks amazing on stage and it's got all pretty lights. The S series has a light above each individual key. They call it Light Guide. And they can actually program it in such a way that when you load a sound, different lights can have different colors. So if you're using a drum plugin, for example, you might have orange for one of the sounds and blue for another and red for another. So you know what the keys do. I cannot see anything, so it's not good for us, but partially sighted people love it. My kids love it. My daughter particularly. She says it looks like a rainbow. She loves that. Similar buttons, but some new ones on the S series that are not present on the A and M series. They are useful, of course.
Right.
But I mean, they won't stop you being accessible with the keyboard or anything like that. Above the screen, there are these 8 soft buttons, which change depending on the mode of the keyboard.
So, as Andre was saying earlier, there is no difference as far as accessibility and being able to access everything that's included in Komplete Kontrol, no matter what level of Komplete Kontrol you have. However, the way you access those things is going to be slightly different. The M32 and the A series in general, you have, I guess you could say, a little bit more limited of a way to get to everything in there. You kind of have to navigate through all your products or through filters, whereas with the S series, you have a few more options to quickly jump to different types of things. Is that an accurate way of putting that?
That's a good way of thinking about it. The browser, for example, in the A series is done with pushing the dial to the left and right, and then you turn it. It's a 6-way encoder, the dial on both keyboards, 6-way. It moves all kind of ways that you look at it and you think that's just a turny thing. but it turns, it clicks, it goes up, down, left, right, and it spins. It's very versatile.
On the A-series keyboards, those are limited to only using the encoder that clicks to the left, right, up, down. You can turn it. You're limited to using that to navigate through your different plugins to load something in Komplete Kontrol, whereas on the S-series, the 8 knobs that you use to adjust the parameters of the sound once the sound is loaded, you can also use to jump to the different categories quickly when navigating.
Yes, you can lay your finger right on a control and turn it and you're straight there.
Exactly. So that's one of the ways the more expensive keyboard kind of speeds up the load process. But other than that, you have access to all the same things. You have access to all the same parameters. You have access to navigating all the same exact plugins and everything.
At the time of doing this recording, the only thing that's missing from the A-series and M browser is the banks option. And if you buy a new battery expansion, for example, you will be at a disadvantage. And this is blind or sighted, by the way. So you're not at any more disadvantage, only the keyboard itself makes you so, that you can't access the banks. And banks are really necessary in certain plugins, so just be warned about this as well. It has been asked them to address it, so we are waiting, hopefully, for them to do that.
And so this is mostly with like battery expansions and things like that?
Yeah, but a lot of synths have banks you'd never know. For example, a lot of orchestral libraries, a lot of synth plugins.
So this is something that's going to depend on your use case. If you're mostly using it for drums and bass and piano sounds, you may not miss the bank feature as much as if you're going to do orchestral and get really into the battery expansions and things of that nature.
But I think it's one of those things where if you didn't know it was there on something else, you wouldn't miss it anyway. So don't let that put you off buying this keyboard. Another
thing to note too is the keyboards are really just a controller for the Komplete Kontrol. So if budget is a concern, you already have a MIDI keyboard that you love playing, you can pick up an M32 and use that as your control interface to navigate Komplete Kontrol, but you can still play, you know, your big 88 key or 61 key or whatever keyboard that you already enjoy playing. So
that's right.
You don't have to replace a keyboard you already love just to be able to play some of these sounds.
Yeah, and a lot of people wonder this at the start, you know, can you have 2 MIDI sources connected to your DAW? Yes, you absolutely can. Anything worth its salt will allow that. So I know a lot of people, for example, buy an M32, they stick it on top of their great big 88 note, weighted thing that they love, Kurzweil or something like that. Usually they put it on the music stand because it's just out of the way then. Use it to browse your sounds and you play on your favorite keyboard and everybody likes that. Yeah.
That's one of the nice things about this setup is that they don't limit the playing to their controllers. It's just navigating and controlling the parameters of the plugins that are limited to their controllers. Speaking of the keyboard and navigating parameters, we were talking about those 8 knobs on the keyboard that allow you to navigate the different parameters, and then as you mentioned, there's a page left and right buttons next to them so you can jump to the next batch of 8 parameters. Those knobs, that's kind of the thing we're going to be using the most. Explain how those knobs work, because you mentioned you can just touch them and turn them and stuff like that.
That's correct. So what happens with these controls is that the manufacturer will decide what parameters would make sense for the Komplete Kontrol keyboard to see, and this is either controversial or very good depending on how good the mapping can be. Sometimes it can be really bad and sometimes it can be fantastic, and the most amount of parameters I've seen mapped was about 107 pages in Hybrid 3. Somebody was just incredibly overzealous, but not in a bad way. You just would have a hard time finding anything you wanted. But look, better to have too much than too little. So you want something on page 96, well, you better be pressing that button like your life depends upon it. So the knobs will allow you to adjust a parameter in real time, and you can even record those changes with host automation in your DAW as well, so you can have a lot of fun. It's a bit like a control surface for synthesizers, really, is what Komplete kind of ends up being.
And from the accessibility standpoint, we get some kind of spoken feedback as you're adjusting those parameters.
Yes, and that's everybody does, because we're beyond 2.6 now. This came out in 2.6 version of Komplete Kontrol software. Prior to 2.6, you would touch a control and it would tell you what the control was, but when you turned it, we wouldn't know what the value was set to. And then 2.6 came out, and I think pretty much everybody jumped for joy. I certainly did.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was coming. And I loaded this up and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been wanting for my whole life.
Yep. That was one of my criticisms finally answered, so I was glad to see that update as well.
Oh yeah. I think we all had that one. And there are times when you have a mode knob, for example. If the mode doesn't tell you what it's changing, and you can turn it, and maybe one of the modes is like I don't know, post effects processing. But if you've got no effects on and your keyboard goes silent, what do you do now? You turn it back. But now, of course, since it talks, you're in a much better position. And also, this has a huge part to play because we haven't talked about effects yet. And since the keyboard can load certain NKS-ready effects, because the keyboard has what they call slots. There's an instrument slot, which is always the first slot of the keyboard, and you have to have an instrument loaded before you try to load an effect. But once you have an instrument loaded, you can go to further slots in the keyboard and load effects. So, for example, we'll take Eventide Black Hole as an example. It's a third-party reverb that you can install, and it's NKS ready. And actually, we should explain this term. So, NKS ready, NKS being the native control standard. When you buy a modern TV, you're looking for it to be at least HD ready. I don't think you can buy non-HD ready TVs anymore, but if I go back to 2006 or 7, when you were looking at TVs, you might find a TV that didn't have that logo on it or that thing, so you couldn't watch HD content on it. So whenever you see NKS ready on a page or NKS compliant, something that mentions NKS, there's a chance that you'll be able to use it with your keyboard. Now, I want to say a chance because some people like to put the mark on their product and actually lie to you. And that's not Native's fault, that's their fault. So just check with someone that knows before you purchase something that sounds really, really good to you. Right. But there was a time, I think it was, I've forgotten, the 2.2, I think, or 2.0 came out with effects. So before this, you couldn't load effects as it in the keyboard, but now you can. So I remember doing a whole video on my channel actually about Black Hole and how I ran it through, I ran a vocal plugin through it. So I set the vocal plugin to dry and I was just playing Black Hole reverb through this vocal and it was just so beautiful. So you can do a lot with effects and you can, I think I've stacked up to 7 once just to see how many would go. It just went and went and went, Nice. It seems to have no end.
Nice. So
but the reason I was talking about this, got on a tangent a bit, is because when we were able to know the values of things, particularly with an effect, which is not always going to have an immediate sound adjustment, knowing what you're turning and what the value is can really help you dial that effect in the way that you want instead of just doing it by ear and guesswork. Right. That's what it boils down to, doesn't it, really? Yeah. So you know the values that you leave something at. So like, if you started off with something at like, 5 dB and you turn it up to like 8 dB and you're like, that's too much, you can turn it back down to 5 dB. So knowing those values 5 dB. Really come in handy for adjusting parameters. And now, does the page, when you page left and right, does that tell you what page you're on, or it just says page left, page right? That is dependent on whether the people that made the NKS mapping themselves wrote page names into the, whatever that is, like the file. The NKS file they created. That does it. Yeah. So there's no right or wrong for that one. Some do, some don't. I think you should, because it lets you know what each knob's going to do before you touch it. But yeah, I've seen things that do, some things that don't. Right. You never quite know. Got you. And then the rest of the keyboard has some DAW controls for stuff like record, play, stop. You can turn cycle mode on. Undo, quantize, metronome as well. Really useful things in a lot of cases. Yep. I find that I use them sometimes and sometimes I don't. It just depends on where I am and how I feel. But it's nice to have the option. Right. And it does have like an arpeggiator. It does have a scale mode. They're quite cool. If you're not sure of a scale. Note repeater. It has a note repeater, which is part of the ARP, really. And those all speak too. And they're quite interesting. And yes, you can record those. But what happens with the Komplete Kontrol ARP is actually it's not recorded in MIDI, but you leave it on in a particular track and it will just be there as you need it. I've found sometimes I find it better to use the Logic MIDI effects for stuff like note repeater or the arpeggiator because it does record the MIDI, so you can go back in and edit it after the fact, whereas in Komplete Kontrol it doesn't record the MIDI data, so you might not be able to edit the performance the way you'd like to in the eventless after the fact. So that's something to be aware of. Now, you mentioned this NKS compliant thing as far as, that's the thing to look for when you're picking up a third-party plugin, for example, a third-party library, for example, something that Native Instruments isn't selling directly through their website. So can you walk us through what the process is like? Let's say you pick up, let's say something like Atmosphere. That's a third-party NKS compliant library.
What would the process for something like that be for a user?
Well, actually, you picked one that isn't natively NKS ready, but we can talk about that because it's a good topic. There are natively third-party NKS libraries.
Can you give us an example of one of those?
Yes. Let's say, for example, Spitfire BBC Symphony Discover. Discover is a free library, or $49 if you pay for it outright. It's free if you answer a survey, and you'll get it within 2 weeks. So that's a good one. So this is a good choice, actually. We'll come back to Omnisphere in a minute. So if you were to download or actually go to Spitfire's website and buy or get the BBC Discover library, what would happen would be you'd use their downloader and you would install it, which is kind of outside the scope of this video, but I do have a video covering that on my channel. And once you've got that installed, you will open the Komplete Kontrol standalone app. Make sure your DAW is closed first, or at least there are no complete instances running in there.
Right.
Because what it does is it updates the database. And when you open Komplete Standalone, it rescans automatically and says, ooh, have you got any new libraries I should know about? And it says, yes, look, I'm here. And it will add it to the database. Now, there are two sides to the browser. Not like the dark side and the light side or anything, but there's the user side and the factory side. Now, when you get, say, for example, the Spitfire library, it's going to appear on the factory side. And the reason being is because a proper manufacturer made their own product NKS ready. And this can get kind of confusing, but I'll explain it more in a minute. So when you buy or get the Spitfire library, it will be on the factory side of your browser, along with all your other Native Instruments products. But if we talk about Omnisphere now, when you purchase Omnisphere, it is not going to natively appear in your browser anywhere in any way, shape, or form. So it is necessary to purchase NKS presets. And there is a guy in Australia who has made quite a killing from selling them on his website. Actually, if you felt like it, you could put a link to his website in the description of the video if you want.
I'll do that as well.
His website is freelancesoundlabs.com, and he has got a lot of products that he's done for loads of different things. So, for example, if you were to get the whole Core Legacy bundle or Omnisphere or Keyscape, and for these, it's a bit of a different process. These will appear on your user side of the browser, which is the side that we've not touched before, and you won't have until you put your first set of NKS presets into a particular folder. So what happens with these is you get your product, and then you go purchase these NKS presets from JSON, and they're a big zip file, and you extract them. And then there's a README that comes with them. I don't really want to get too deep into where things go necessarily, but I will answer questions outside of this if people really need to know, because I'm happy to help. But essentially, you'll put these NKS presets into a particular folder that Komplete Kontrol can see and therefore can pick up on. And once those are in place, assuming you got it all right, and you again open Komplete Kontrol, and it would pick up on your new presets, when you go into the browser, you would switch to the user side of the browser. Now, on the A&M series, you'd press the page right key, which is a key that we're quite used to for browsing plugin parameters and things. On the S series, we talk about these 8 buttons above the screen, and these are soft buttons, i.e. they change their function depending on the mode that the keyboard is in. In the browser, what I call F4, which is essentially the fourth soft button along the top from the left, a bit like a computer keyboard. This is a toggle between factory and user. So I've got addictive drums, for example. I know you do as well. So you can get NKS presets for addictive drums. Every single kit, both GM and non-GM layouts are there. And I think Jason's done some 20-something pages of mapping for the addictive layout. It's quite extensive. And I am an addictive drums lover, so I use that a lot in my work. So I can't not have addictive in my layout, you know. So when I found out that there was addictive drums and I could go buy the kits again, because I was using them in Windows before Komplete, I was all over that like a rash. Gotta have addictive. So Jason has been a place that a lot of blind people go to because he does great work as well. And he's also quite willing to fix any issues with NKS files if he is able to do that. He's very receptive.
So you've been able to reach out to him and say, hey, could you label this a little better, or add this to the NKS file, and he's willing to do it if it's something he has access to edit himself.
Yes, and he's made a good job with these. Now, I should clarify something, because this came up a few weeks ago on the list. A lot of people think that if you buy the NKS presets, you own the product. You don't. Somebody bought the NKS presets for a product, but didn't own the product. So when they went to load that in Komplete Kontrol, it just said plugin not found.
Right.
And they couldn't understand why. And it may seem obvious to some, but it's not necessarily. You buy the NKS presets, that doesn't mean you own the product. They're just preset files. They do nothing more than just give you access to the sounds, but you have to own the product first.
So to clarify, you'll have to go to, say, the Spitfire Labs website or the Spectrasonics website or the website of any of these companies that makes a instrument that has an NKS compatible preset. You have to go to their website, buy the product first, download and install and authorize the product and all that stuff. And then if it doesn't have NKS built in from the manufacturer like the Spitfire Labs stuff do, you then go to Jason's website, freelancesoundlabs.com, and you'll purchase the NKS presets. Once you unzip the files, copy them into your user content folder, which the README will denote where that is on your system. Copy them into that folder. Now you can open Komplete Kontrol standalone app. It will scan in the background, make sure it updates its database to notice that you have new presets and new plugins, etc. And then when you load Komplete Kontrol in Logic, or whatever DAW you're using it in, you can then go ahead and navigate to those new libraries that you've just installed.
That's it.
Right. And so in the case of the Freelance Sound Labs NKS file, because that is a user like you and I that created these presets, that's going to show up in the user bank. But if the company includes the NKS mappings with the product directly, like in the case of some of the Spitfire stuff, that shows up in the factory banks.
That's right.
Yeah.
Although let me make your life harder. Spitfire Labs themselves is not native. Someone does those on the free Native Instruments forum. Spitfire BBC, however, is native.
Right. So all the Spitfire Labs products, those you will once again need to download a third-party NKS preset file for.
That's right.
And those will show up in the user bank. But the Spitfire BBC Orchestra and are there other Spitfire products that include?
There's tons of them.
Okay.
Absolutely tons.
Right.
But there are also tons that are not.
So Spitfire is one of those companies
This is why you have to read.
Right. Okay. I got you now. So Spitfire you'll have to read. The lab stuff someone created third-party NKS presets for, and so those will show up in the user bank. But the Spitfire BBC and other Spitfire libraries that have native NKS support built into them,
they will say NKS on the page.
Right.
And I made sure that they would include this because it's so important. We don't always know, and it's very easy to go, well, surely if one of your products does, everything does. And you buy something and then you find out it doesn't.
Exactly.
And some people will not refund you something if you've actually already downloaded it. Some people
downloaded and authorized it. Yep.
Yeah, because you don't always know.
Yep.
I made that mistake a few years ago. I bought, I'm guilty as anybody. I bought a Spitfire library, which was £29, $29. It was called Epic Strings, and it's their originals range. Now, most, but not all, of the Spitfire originals range, and all of the originals range is exactly the same price, $29, euros or pounds. Very good for what they are. Most of them are NKS ready. The one I got wasn't. It actually turned out I added the wrong one to cart. I wanted a particular thing, I got something else. I just was being blind and not careful. My own fault entirely. So what I did do is I went on the Native Instruments forum and I asked someone, would you please make these presets for me and I can pay you for your time? And he did. And it's the same guy that does the Labs presets, actually, a wonderful guy from Greece called Christos. Now he made those, and so I can use the thing I bought, but for the first 6 to 8 months I owned it, I couldn't use it.
Right.
And also because Spitfire's preset browsing, without Komplete Kontrol, is horrible. Even VOCR just doesn't see the preset list, so you're screwed if you just.
So basically,
you just have to be really careful.
So that's something to note. Check the site that you're ordering from, see if it says NKS compliant. If the website doesn't say, then check a website like Freelance Sound Labs to see if they have NKS presets for it.
Yeah.
And then Andre mentioned the Komplete Kontrol forums or Native Instrument forums is another place where if they're not listed there by a user, you might be able to inquire and see if someone's willing to take the time to create them for you if there's a library you're interested in that you haven't been able to find NKS presets for. And I'll try to put links to all of these in the description of this as well. So
yeah, it's really worth it.
Yep.
And also I'll give you a link to the Complete Dropbox repository where we've collected all the free stuff. So anything that is legally free that's NKS, basically presets, a massive repository of just presets.
Right.
we've tried to link to that, and we've got a big Dropbox folder of those things. So we can basically say, like, for example, I keep the labs one updated because that forum can be hard to navigate. And since each new labs update is monthly and comes in a new forum post, you may never find the original. So every time I see there's a new labs update, I go back to the original post, I download the zip file for that particular preset pack, and I update one big monolithic lab zip file, which now has, I think, 43 different labs things in there.
Nice.
There's one for every labs product.
Okay.
So Labs Grows, it's a free set of tools which actually would complement your complete start selection really, really nicely. And because it's free, it would actually give you a good set of tasks to do to play with third-party NKS, and I would highly encourage everybody to use it. It would, because it's actually 18 gigs, I think, now. When I first started with Labs, it was like 5 or 6 gigs. It's grown in this year alone, massively.
Right.
So releasing one new thing every month. And there's some genuinely great stuff in there. For example, a lot of people don't know this, but there's a very particular felt piano, soft piano that you hear in almost every blockbuster movie in the last 10 years on Netflix, on Apple TV, on Amazon. That is Lab Soft Piano. It is apparently the world's most downloaded piano, and it is free. That's mind-blowing.
It's kind of like the Logic thing. A lot of people get Logic and immediately get into some of these third-party plugins and instruments, and I think sometimes we forget how much of the stock Logic sound is on top 40 radio. It's the same thing in this scenario. A lot of these free tools in 2022 are ridiculously good in a lot of cases. Not every free plugin is going to be excellent, but at least as far as some of the sound libraries from companies that do make professional products that they sell, a lot of the free versions,
good free stuff.
Exactly. A lot of the free ones are worth your time to check out, especially if you're just getting started and your budget for some of the bigger Complete libraries, Complete Select, Complete Ultimate, etc., isn't quite where you'd like it to be yet. Don't discount some of these free libraries. I think I'm blanking on their name now. They just did a free Complete instrument that had native NKS support and everything. Heaviosity, thank you. That's the one.
That Foundations piano, that is beautiful.
Yes. So
that's a really great piano for free.
Yes,
wow.
So that's another good one. And we'll talk about some more of those as well, but that's the thing to be aware of. Just check the product page, make sure it says NKS compliant. If it doesn't, check a website like Freelance Sound Labs to see if they have NKS files. If they do, remember you got to buy the plugin first and authorize it and install it before those NKS presets from a site like Freelance Sound Labs is going to work. But that's basically it. So you can take advantage of instruments that you weren't able to take advantage of before, thanks to these people taking the time to make these user presets if the company chose not to make the presets, the NKS presets themselves.
And this is it, and a lot of the stuff will eventually, if you're buying big expensive libraries, as I have done in the last few years, a lot of it, if you're doing work or you're gigging, will just pay for itself. I mean, I can guarantee you without any shred of a doubt, I wouldn't have bought Addictive Drums, any of the Korg stuff, Omnisphere, if I couldn't use it in the keyboard. And not because I'm keyboard elitist, but because their preset browsers are just not accessible.
Yeah. There are people who are drummers that use an e-kit, and it's difficult for them to access something like Addictive Drums without the Komplete Kontrol system if they're a blind drummer. And I think the thing to point out here, and this is something that you just kind of blew my mind with the other day because I didn't even realize it, is something like Addictive Drums and Omnisphere and programs like those are not in any way, shape, or form related to Native Instruments. They're not using Kontakt as a sampler behind the scenes. It's a complete third-party standalone instrument, but because Komplete Kontrol can load any VST instrument, it's just a matter of making the NKS presets for them once they're loaded.
That's right.
So if there's an instrument that's available that does not have NKS presets for, it might be worth once again reaching out to Freelance Sound Labs to see if it's something they'd be willing to add to their to-do list and make a preset for it, as this is probably our best bet of accessing it and for the immediate future.
Yeah, and his prices are extremely competitive. He's in Australia. I think the most I've ever paid for something was like $39.99 Australian dollars for, 6,000 plus presets. And he often has to hand tag these things because you can only automate so many things. He has to often hand make and hand tag all of these presets.
Right.
And so 39 Aussie dollars is maybe 33 US, maybe 29 in pounds. It's like, 18, 20 pounds.
Yep.
It's nothing on top of the price you already paid for this kind of product. So to gain this very kind of unprecedented level of access, yeah,
right.
I'd buy the guy a beer any day. You know?
And I think that's one of those controversial conversations in the community. Is like, we shouldn't have to pay extra for accessibility, but in this particular instance, it's less about paying extra for accessibility and more about paying extra to access this in a manner that you'd like, because this guy's not making NKS presets for the blind community. He's making NKS presets for people that prefer to use their third-party libraries inside of the Komplete Kontrol keyboard system because of how easy it is to control the parameters.
Yeah, and this is actually a good point you raised. A lot of people ask, why would you use this if you're not blind? Well, a lot of people use the voice part of it if you're dyslexic or if you have, suffer from eye strain. And being away from the computer screen actually can stop you being distracted because there are transport keys on the keyboard. As long as you can undo and redo and quantize and do all those things, you can continue making completely from the other side of the room if you want to.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of people where their big 88 key keyboard that they used to play might be set up at a right angle to the computer, so it's nice that they don't have to turn around to steering their neck to look at the computer screen to do something. They turn on the accessibility mode and have Komplete talk to them, and they can sit facing their keyboard and play and change parts out and move through the project, move to a new track, etc., and work without having to go back to the keyboard until they're done recording all the parts. It's one of those things we say a lot. Sometimes when accessibility is implemented, it ends up helping everyone out, not just us. And I think that's something to remind companies of sometimes as well too.
Agreed. Wholeheartedly agreed.
And something to note too, by the way, Logic technically does not load VSTs. But because you're loading this inside of Komplete Kontrol, you can load the VST instrument inside of Komplete Kontrol. So when you're installing these third-party instruments, make sure you install both the AU and the VST version of them, because Komplete Kontrol needs the VST version to load it inside of Komplete Kontrol.
Komplete doesn't load AU files, and Logic doesn't load VSTs. So you kind of need both.
Exactly. So now that we've talked about all that, let's talk about some of your favorite sounds and some of your favorite tools to use within this ecosystem. So let's start with the free and or inexpensive ones first. As far as, let's say, drums or bass, basic sounds like that for putting together a track, is there anything you like? Is there anything you'd recommend?
Well, this goes back again to Labs, completely free. You just can't go wrong with Labs. There are certain things which you just think, oh, that's not as nice as it could be. For example, the Labs bass guitar, if you don't turn down the decay of the bass sound, it just sounds really long and plastic.
That's kind of my complaint about a lot of MIDI basses. So.
Yeah, but there are some great ones still. But for example, if you want drums, there's a great Labs, it's called Labs Percussion, which is a misleading name because what Labs Percussion is, it's one single sound, it's a whole GM kit with proper everything laid out exactly where you'd expect it, the full thing. It's very, very hard these days to find a GM kit that is, standard top to bottom. Labs Percussion is exactly that. Okay. Labs Drums is a drum kit, but it's not GM all the way down. At some point, it just stops. There's no bongos, congos, triangles, cucas in there. So things like that. If you need, for example, you're bringing in an old MIDI file that you worked on your old motif or something, you can bring in that into Labs Percussion, and you've got a fully fledged kit there that sounds really good. Someone went out of their way to do round robins and multi-layers on a drum kit.
Nice.
Labs has 2 pianos now. Only recently it got Robert Glass's piano. So there's the Labs soft piano, which I talked about before, and then there's this new Glass piano, which is quite nice. There's a lot of strings in Labs because Spitfire is primarily an orchestral company, so there's a lot of that sort of stuff. And
I imagine the strings that are in Labs probably don't have as many articulations and variations
don't really.
The paid Spitfire orchestral libraries.
But there's certainly nothing to scoff at. I've written whole pieces using just Lab sounds before.
And if you're doing contemporary music that just includes strings, then you're not gonna probably need half those articulations and other stuff.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. And if you combine that with, let's say, Logic, because that's what this channel is about, then you've got that to back you up. Never think, for example, that you can't use Komplete and Logic together. Track stacks are your friend. So you can stack and Logic strings along with, say, Labs piano. You can't go wrong. I'm a big fan of it.
The Labs are some of your favorite stuff as far as the free stuff goes. Anything else outside of Labs that you'd recommend as far as free sounds that you enjoy?
The Heaviosity piano that you nearly made me forget about, which is good. The Foundations piano. I did a playthrough of that recently on my channel as well. I did a no talking playthrough, but I did chapters. Each chapter is a different sound. I think there's 7 odd sounds, so I think the video is about 7 minutes long or something. So I just played for a couple of seconds on each of them, and you can hear what it's like. Grab that one. Now the thing is about this, I would go off on a tangent a little bit about Kontakt libraries, because the way it works is Native Instruments charges a company to make their library available to use in Kontakt Full and Kontakt Player. And we have to discuss Kontakt Player and Kontakt Full because you can run into some issues if you're not careful. Kontakt Full you will get when you get a particular tier of Komplete Kontrol, complete software. Sorry.
It's the complete
and I always
tier, I believe. Complete.
Which?
Yeah, so it's not included in Complete Start and Complete Select. So you have to have Complete Ultimate, or Complete Ultimate Collector's Edition to get the full version of Kontakt and Battery.
Good call on that. And Kontakt Player comes in the earlier versions of these now.
Yes.
Normally, the way this works is that Kontakt Player, you would have to pay for a library that uses Kontakt Player because these libraries are serialized. If you get a Kontakt library that doesn't require a serial, it normally requires you to use it, actually, no, definitely, in Kontakt Full. And it's because that way somebody's still getting money for it. It's harder to explain than to put into action, but it's weird. So the reason I bring this up at all is because the Heaviosity free piano can be run in Kontakt Player, and that is because it's a serialized library. Now, what this means for you as the user is that if you ever see a library come up that's free and can run in Kontakt Player, even if you don't want it, you need to get it. Because what will happen eventually is that those serial numbers will run out, and unless the company's doing very well financially, because these serials cost a lot of money, they just won't renew it. This happened to the Sonic Couture Hammersmith free piano, for example. That was a 5 gig piano with loads of round robins, a fully fledged piano.
Yeah,
it ran in
very,
Kontakt
very
Player.
nice piano sound.
Genuinely good. I'm glad I snapped it up when I did. And they said because it went, the stocks just went so quickly, they just couldn't afford to keep doing that and keep doing that. They still bring it back one day, but we'll wait for a bit. And I absolutely see why they had to do that.
Right.
And that one is also NKS ready. So when that comes back again, and it will, grab the Hammersmith free piano from Sonic Couture. Grab the Heaviosity Foundations piano from Heaviosity. These are 2 absolutely great pianos, very different in scope. One of them you can use for about every kind of music you want, and that's the Hammersmith. And the Foundations is more geared towards sort of cinematic and dark music. But you can do quite a bit with it too. It's got arpeggios and all sorts of things in there. It's very nice.
Right, right.
Now, let's talk about our first $30 synth. Because we have to discuss Neo Soundstation. This came up recently on the group. Kevin Reeves told us about it, and it is a $30 synth, which is, I would say, a bit like an old Rompler. It's got a bit of everything in there. It's 5 gigabytes. It runs in Kontakt Player, so it is a serialized library, and I think it's done by this Hungarian dude, and it's NKS ready out of the box.
Right.
No third party need. It's Kontakt library as well, and I tell you, it is impressive. Do you have this yet, Steve?
I have not. I think just this morning saw a post from Kevin about that, and have not had a chance to check out his video about
listen
it.
to his post. And also,
Yeah.
I did a demo of it on my channel as well, just called Neo Soundstation, and it is way better and bigger than it has a right to be for $30. I mean, it has some sounds have key switches, Steve, for $30.
Wow.
And this is not the sale price. This is the price of the product. And it's got, I think, 500 odd sounds, and it's 5 gigs. Most of them are layered, round robin. Like, it's a surprisingly fully fledged thing. So if, for example, you're a complete start or select user, and you want something that just sort of gives you a bit more than what you have. For example, Complete Select doesn't come with any of the Scarby basses apart from Rickenbacker, I think.
Right.
Grab this Neo Soundstation thing. You will not regret your purchase.
Nice. Okay. So good basses.
Shockingly good.
Yeah, basses are one of those things that I find are hit or miss. They might sound decent when you're playing them, but like you said, sometimes you when you let it like a note sustain, that's where you kind of hear the MIDI come out.
Oh, stop it.
Yeah, so
Yes.
you know
You
that's
could run into problems like
yeah.
that.
I think my little hack was just like converting them to audio and just fading them out.
That works too.
Yeah,
Absolutely works
so
too.
that's so if you like the sound but you don't like those tails, sometimes that's like a little hack you can use to work around some of those. But yeah, so that's definitely something I've run into with basses though. So finding good basses is always a good thing. And bass and drums, I feel like, as far as contemporary sounds go that aren't orchestral sounds or things like that, bass and drums are the two that I feel they've really gotten good at making sample libraries for or synthesized versions of. Guitars, I still, as a guitar player,
it's difficult. I'm not even a keyboard guitar player. I'm a keyboard drummer. Drums, cool. Guitars still bother me.
Yeah. A lot of even high-end guitar libraries still bother me. You can make them work, especially if you're going to put them in a track where there's a lot of other stuff going on. But if you try to make them a feature instrument, it can get a little tricky.
Mr. James Berry is the king of keyboard guitars, along with Kevin. These are two people I know that can just absolutely kill anyone else on keyboard guitar.
Yep.
Me, I'm drums. Those guys, guitars, amazing.
Yeah, I'm the one that eventually just got a guitar synth because I'm tired of trying to play these parts on a keyboard. So.
Yeah, it's not always easy.
Yeah. So as a guitar player, I just find it a little bit easier to put in the MIDI that way sometimes too. And even for bass, I mean, I just kind of just gave up and just got a bass because I can play it on a bass a lot faster than I can play it on MIDI bass, so.
Now I love MIDI bass.
Yeah.
Bass is not the same as guitar because I don't know. There's something about MIDI bass I just kill. I love that.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. You're a keyboard player, so that comes a lot more naturally to you than it does to someone like me.
It can do.
Yep. But I think that's something to understand too. Like, understand your limitations, and sometimes it's nice. And bass especially is one of those instruments. The inexpensive ones record really well. You don't need an expensive bass to get really good bass tones on a recording. Find something inexpensive, put some fresh strings on there, and you're off
and
to
a good
races. Yep. Say that again?
Yeah, if you're going to DI it, stick it to the good out. And this is true of libraries too, because things that sound bad when you play them can often sound okay in a mix.
In the mix,
and
exactly.
you might be able to hide it.
Yes, very true, very true. So. All right, so
this actually takes us back to plugins, because we talked about this $30 synth. $29 will go down one, or £29 if you're in the UK. The Spitfire Originals library, some of those we talked about, and I just did a video for Spitfire a few weeks ago on this Abe Laboriel Original Junior drums.
Right.
Abe Laboriel Junior, I should say, because there are two of them. And they have this Originals drum kit library, which is $29, pounds, euros. Very nice. Got round robins, up to 8 velocity layers. 3 mic positions as well. So you get native NKS with this, by the way.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if you've seen that video.
I remember watching it. Yeah, I did watch that one, and it does sound lovely. So I might end up picking that up at some point in time as well.
Yeah, it's come out all right. And for people wanting multi-out, the best way to do this is actually do multiple passes of it and just turn on the solo for any given part you want, because they do have solos there.
Right.
Because it's a cheap library, they just didn't do multi-out on this.
Right.
Now there are
this one is not a limitation of Komplete Kontrol accessibility.
No,
this one's a limitation of the library. It's an inexpensive library, so there's no multi-out option, period.
No,
Right.
But what they do have in this one that some people might really like is they have these loops. So you can, there's 10 different loop kits for different styles, and you can just hold down a key on the keyboard or multiple, well, not at the same time because you'd have a mismatch, but you can switch between different loops to fit the style of your piece if you need to.
Oh, okay.
Really useful.
I've seen that with another library, and I forget which library does that. One of the native instrument drum libraries does that, I believe.
DrumLab does.
DrumLab, that's the one. Yep. Okay, so it's similar to how DrumLab works in that regards.
Yeah, that kind of idea.
I got you.
And strings. Spitfire also have basically the whole Originals line. Nearly all of it, as I say, is NKS, but you have to read. They've got pianos in that range, like the Mrs. Mills piano, the Jangle Box piano, a couple other ones, and then strings. They've got this Epic Strings, which isn't NKS ready, by the way. I should point that out. But yeah, any of the Spitfire Originals libraries are all $29, pounds, euros, and just read and make sure that you get something that you can actually use, because you don't want to miss that out.
Okay.
So those are nice, cheap-ish alternatives.
Right.
And then you can get slightly more expensive, and then you start getting into all sorts of territory. Now, anything above $29, $30 is likely to change price on a whim. So I don't really want to give any more prices.
Yeah. If worst case scenario, sign up to the mailing list on most of these sites, and you'll get an email when stuff goes on sale. That's another thing as well to be aware of.
And also sign up to pluginboutique.com, because they often have sales on things. The one next thing I was going to say was Expand 2, which is, a synth from Air Music, which is 1 gig in size, but don't be fooled by that. Got over 2,000 sounds in the thing. A lot of them have round robins and layers. Actually, not round robins, I don't think. Layers, yes. Round robins, not necessarily. and not native NKS, but there are NKS presets available for it from Jason at Freelance Sound Labs. So this would be one of the options where you would have to go out of your way to get them, but highly recommendable and recommended.
Have you used,
and then
before you move on, have you used any of the other Air instruments?
I've got all of them.
Okay.
Well, all the AEP3 bundle. So there was 10 synths in that.
Right.
I don't have, for example, Boom and Loom 2.
Right.
But I've got all the other ones, like all the DB33s and the
Baby
drums
Grand and stuff like that.
Yes. And honestly, they're not at all bad. They're old sounds now in terms of modern day, but they're good little romplers, a lot of these.
Right. And those are all NKS compatible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jason's done them all.
Gotcha. Okay. And moving on.
Jason. Yeah. So I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh yes, I was going to talk about effects, because there may come a time when you want a sort of NKS effect. Now, Complete versions of Complete will come with at least one effect. And Guitar Rig, we talked about at the very, very beginning, is NKS ready now. You only tend to get a single page of parameters when in effects mode on the keyboard, but you can see all the parameters when you use it as an effect on the track.
Right.
So what I find is that normally, as there are so many presets in Guitar Rig, it's very easy to find something, because it's a multi-effect, that just does everything I need it to do without much effort. And I'm cool with that.
Right.
I don't always need to tweak something.
Exactly.
The ability to do it, very nice. But sometimes there are so many presets, because people make so many for these things, that you can find what you want with little,
I don't see listing includes 3,000 presets as a positive thing that I used to when I first started doing this.
Yeah.
Because it just means that's a lot of time you're going to spend looking for something you want to use sometimes, so yeah, it can get overwhelming sometimes.
That's why favorites are a good thing, and you can favorite on the keyboard. And this is one thing I wish the Logic library could do. Now, you can save the preset you like in your user library as a new name, but just the ability to favorite would make the Logic library just ultimately more useful in some ways.
Yeah.
But Complete Control can favorite. So if you find a preset, and the one thing we should mention actually is Complete's browser is alphabetical. So irrespective of what the manufacturer put as their preset list, if you loaded the plugin up natively, you may not see alphabetical presets. But Complete doesn't respect that. It's all alphabetical. So if you find something up in the P's and you've got 3,000 presets to go to, but you found one that you liked one day, 3 years ago, make sure you favorite it.
Yeah.
Then you can filter by favorites and browse straight to it.
Right. So
okay. This is honestly vital for workflow.
I think we mentioned Bass Slapper earlier, or Bass Fingers earlier.
Bass Fingers, Bass Slapper, absolutely beautiful.
Those are
Great
from
stuff.
Waves, so those are third-party NKS compliant plugins as well. And Waves is always running some kind of sale. So once again, get on their mailing list.
If there's a day that isn't a Wave sale, and I'll eat my hat.
Yeah, if there's a day that isn't a Wave sale, it didn't end in a Y. So let's put it that way.
Yes.
So
now I actually did get those for $29 each when they were out. So I was very glad. I love those. They're really good sounds, and they also have key switches, I think, and mutes and slides. Now, a lot of the basses you find with these higher end libraries, they just don't have your good old bass slides, and I love those.
Yep, I agree.
You can't fake those in MIDI.
That's the one reason why I ended up just buying a bass.
It's so annoying.
Yeah.
But the Waves Bass Slapper, the Fingers certainly does. I think the Slapper does too.
I think Slapper has some of those in there too. Yeah.
I was so glad to see that.
Yeah.
Because what I was doing before was actually auto-sampling my Phantom XR just for a patch that had the bass slides in it. Just those few 5 or 6 notes. And I was calling that bass noises .patch. That served me well.
Yeah.
It still does.
Gotta get creative sometimes. But
sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yep. And Waves is one of those companies that it's the rabbit hole you're gonna fall into. So consider yourself warned. That's all I'm gonna say.
Waves.
Be very careful with Waves.
You might live to regret it.
Yes. So that's all we're gonna say on that one. So moving on to some of your top tier libraries, what are some of your favorites out there?
Right. Well, I was able to upgrade a bit like Complete Select and everything. I upgraded from Spitfire BBC Orchestra Core, which was £300 odd or something. But I did that on the Able Artist discount. So we should sort of mention two things in one here. Able Artist Foundation is I think it's like a non-profit org. I don't want to say that for absolute
It's
certainty.
either non-profit or not-for-profit. I don't remember which, but it's...
Not-for-profit, I think so.
Yeah.
And they will allow, if you can prove that you're on some kind of disability benefit, SSI or SDI, whatever you guys call it, and incapacity in the UK, PIP, and you can prove it, then you can often get a lot of things at 50% discount. And this is a worldwide organization, so you can sign up in the US, in Australia, in the UK, and all sorts of places. Right. So I was able to get, for example, I started off with Spitfire BBC Core on a discount, and then I upgraded to the Pro version when they had a new version come out, and they were adding, more gigabytes of data. And because it's natively NKS ready, I call it third first party NKS, because third party did it, but it's on the factory side of the browser, so it looks like a first party product.
Right.
So I upgraded from, I started off with Core and I got Pro, for example, because I wanted an all-out orchestra.
Right.
Now, I may never use all of those functions, but I do a lot of producing with people, and there may come a time when I need a particular sound in a line, so I'll go there for that sound. It's great.
Right,
it's nice to have a fully fledged, something that makes me feel like a proper musician.
A proper orchestrator.
I know, and I'm definitely not one.
Right.
But I kind of feel like it's a rite of passage in a way. You have to have at least one fully fledged, because a lot of these are ensembles, A lot of these packages that you get, and particularly in the Romplers, they're all ensemble patches. You can play the bottom end, the top end, and it will do what it needs to do. But with a proper orchestra, you've actually got to play the thing properly. So it teaches you to use it, especially if you put that much money down on something. So there's things like that. Now, other higher end things, of course, I managed to, over a period of time, accumulate all the Addictive drums kits and presets. Right. Love Addictive. We know that.
Another company, get on their mailing list, look out for those sales. They do 50% off.
They do early bird sales
sometimes.
too, if you're lucky. Get on the, do that. And they're good. And actually, a tip, every time I can find them, I'll give you a tip about this. When I bought the Custom XL kit from Addictive, and that gave me 6 kits, 6 kit pieces, and 6 MIDI packs. The MIDI packs and the kit pieces are not accessible to us as blind people. Nothing to do with Complete. They're just not accessible.
Yeah.
But what you can do, if you can tell them that you're blind and say, look, can you take away my 6 kit pieces and MIDI packs and give me a couple more kits, is they will do that. I emailed them the first time, and I think I was one of the first to do it. And I said, look, if you don't mind this, I will tell a few other blind people not to abuse the system, because you're not losing any money on it.
Yeah.
And they often will give you, maybe 2 to 3 or more kits, 1 to 2 more kits, depending on who you get.
Depending on what you're supposed to have as far as kit pieces go and stuff like that.
That's right.
Right.
So again, this is a good way to get a good sale. When you see Addictive drums come up on sale, you get the Custom XL preset pack, if they still do that one, and you can maybe get 8 for the price of 6. Right. No bad thing, really.
Right. I need to do that myself, because I don't remember if I ever did pick my kit pieces and loops. So I should contact them.
That's why you don't pick them and then let them take them off and give you a couple of kits in lieu of those things.
Right. So I'll have to look in my account and see where I'm at, and hopefully I can get a couple extra kit pieces out or kits out of it.
Yeah, that's what I did. I said I knew I wasn't going to get the other stuff. I just picked the kits, and Jason had already done the presets for them, so I was just sort of in a holding pattern. And I emailed them and I said, X, Y, Z, can you do this? And they're like, sure, yeah, we'll do it. Right. So we got that. Right. And then over a period of time, I managed to accumulate all the rest of them. I've got their whole product line now. Addictive keys as well. That's the point, actually. Addictive keys is quite inexpensive. So if you need a good Rhodes, a good piano sound, they've got that. And again, Jason does presets for those too, so you're not doing too badly.
Good to know. Okay.
And maybe, Steve, you didn't know, but I recently asked the same Christos guy to do presets for RC20 Color.
The saturation tape effect that Addictive
and I actually
makes.
think it's more useful than having all the parameters, because there's quite a lot of parameters, but having it all access on the keyboard, I find anyway, for myself, I can get to things faster. And I think it's one of those effects that takes a long time to slide the presets, the values. Right. So having a knob, you can just twist, and it's very fast. So having,
By the way, there is a tip on how to move those a little faster that I covered in the 3rd Facts and Logic on the channel. So check that video out. Yes, there's a way to move through those slow parameters a little bit faster. So.
It's so irritating.
Yeah, it is, and like we said, it's something you're gonna encounter with a lot of third-party plug-in parameters when you try to adjust them. They move in really, really small increments, and I think that's one of the things I've always loved about Plugin Alliance, is that they don't do that. They work more like the Logic ones. So.
Yeah. Oh, we like that.
Yes, definitely.
Haven't even loaded any of those yet. Haven't had a chance to play.
Yeah,
busy.
But
that's good to know. I'll do that.
So you were saying that I forget which ones we're talking about now. The Addictive drums. The Retrocolor RC20.
That's what it's called. I couldn't remember. Retrocolor.
So you're saying you got NKS presets for those as well.
Yes, and they're in the Dropbox that I got the complete Dropbox. I'll get a link to that for you.
No,
which is lovely.
And I imagine something like that would sound really nice on pianos and Sims, especially if you want to make them sound a little warmer.
I've played sound through that for half an hour at a time. It is gorgeous.
Yeah. So
you can lose yourself.
So Addictive is another company to keep an eye on, and to their credit, they try to be accommodating. Don't abuse the system, but reach out to them, see if they're willing to work with you.
That's right. That's XLN Audio, by the way, for anybody curious. XLNaudio.com.
Yep.
Good company. Great sounds. Very small footprint as well. Their entire drum package is like less than 20 gigs, I think.
Yeah, don't look at Slate or Superior Drummer.
Oh, gosh.
You might need a separate external just for their drum libraries.
That's kind of true of BBC Symphony from Spitfire as well. That thing is 600 gigs for one library.
Yeah, it better give you every part of the orchestra.
It fills up a lot of my 4 terabyte. It's nuts.
So...
but we did talk about it earlier as well. Got to mention Keyscape and Omnisphere. Again, third party NKS. Jason did those from Freelance Sound Labs. So when you get those, you will be wanting to buy the NKS presets. But great libraries to have. Massive collections of great sounds. Over 10,000 in Omnisphere already, and Keyscape I think is 400 something.
Right, and both
collector keyboards, you know.
And both of those are industry standard sounds that you hear everywhere.
Oh, goodness gracious, everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't move for hearing Omnisphere and Keyscape, not at all.
Is there bass NKS compliant as well?
Oh, Trillion.
Trillion, yeah.
Yeah, I've been saving up for that. I'm going to buy that. Jason did it as well. I will be buying Trillion at some point for sure. Yeah. I like me some basses.
Yeah, that's an industry standard bass plugin. So but it's like you said, you got to save up for that one.
Yeah, it's a bit beastie. You know, I mean, I thought I'd just round off the whole set, you know.
Right.
Keyscape, Omnisphere, Trillion, maybe eventually Stylus RMX.
Right.
But I want Trillion first.
Yeah, I know Trillion is used everywhere. Like even a lot of the metal productions that I listen to, I found out they're using Trillion to program bass line for that stuff too.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So that's another well used in the industry plugin. They're obviously less expensive libraries, but they're usually going to be either focused or not as full featured. So that's something, you know, bass slapper is just slap bass, bass fingers is just fingered bass. Whereas Trillion is...
And then there's Modo Bass from IK Multimedia,
Right.
but can we just not talk about them? Their website and their process for downloading is just
everything
horrible.
IK. Like my running joke about IK Multimedia, I love their hardware, I hate their software. You know,
that should be the blind slogan, I think.
Yeah.
We love the hardware, hate the software.
Like their micro monitors are excellent if you need really small, really portable studio monitors. Both versions of them are excellent.
I think Louis said the same actually. I think he's got IK Multimedia.
Yeah. And I have both the micro monitors and the MTN monitors, and both of them are great monitors.
And you know, their sounds are good.
Yeah.
If they brought out, for example, iGrand Piano, which I have on iOS or had a long time ago, the interface again sucked. But if they brought that out as a piano on Mac or Windows, I would buy it.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like a great piano.
Yeah. And
I was shocked at how good that thing sounds.
Yeah, their stuff sounds great, but you know, it's just like their hardware tends to be better. As far as accessibility goes, you know, I have one of their acoustic, mic plugins, iRig acoustic stage. That's a really excellent tool for micing up acoustic guitars in a pinch. Their interfaces are pretty decent from what I've heard. So a lot of decent hardware, but it's just trying to navigate the website and purchase things and get plugins working will make you pull your hair out. So
yes, and I fought through that. I got the Modo Bass plugin when it was on sale for like $79, and I nearly just didn't. I spent 2 hours, I think, literally trying to just enter my birthday and trying to make an account. And just don't. Yeah,
I've heard other people running those even just registering the hardware they bought. Like if you buy one of the monitors or something like that, even just registering it at times. No accessible capture on the account creation page. It can be quite annoying to deal with IK Multimedia. And yes, even Modo Bass, you're saying you only have access to the presets. You can't even adjust the parameters and stuff like that.
That's right, and the reason that is because there are no automatable parameters within Modo Bass.
Yeah.
That's not the guy that made them's fault. That is Modo Bass's fault.
Yeah, I noticed
even
that.
If you were to use it outside of Komplete, you would get nothing.
Yep, because I demoed it when it first came out, and I noticed that there were no automatable parameters in there. So yeah, you're stuck with the presets.
That's the same with Superior Drummer 3 as well. That's why no one's done NKS for that, for example, because there's just no point.
Yeah. And I assume Ease Drummer is kind of the same way.
I don't know. I think so.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I looked at that.
Right.
Like I've got Superior Drummer too, but I'm just not a fan of Superior Drummer like drum sounds. I think they're so dry and you have to work at them. And I think part of it is because I came from a hardware standpoint where you could load up a drum kit and it's ready to play.
Yeah.
And Addictive feels like hardware to me.
Right.
You load up a kit, it's got decent compression on it, you can play it straight away. With Superior, you have to massage it.
Right.
And I don't always have the time because I'm working to a deadline or I need to get this idea down.
Right.
Now, it's not that the drums are bad. This is all in me, by the way. I take full responsibility for this. I just don't have the energy to think about what gate and what compressor I should put on each individual drum.
You're right.
It just
and that's kind of the same thing I say about the Logic drums too, is it kind of comes up in a very natural state where you can make it whatever you want it to be, but it might not be your first choice if you want to pull up something that sounds production ready out of the box. Not to say that they're completely dry, but you know, if you're doing certain modern genres of music, they may not be in that vein when you first pull up the patch in Logic with some of the Logic drum synths, stock drum synths. But you know,
well, exactly.
It's a matter of what you're looking for at the end of the day. Do you just want something that sounds great that you can get right into creating with, or do you like pushing the envelope and kind of creating your own sounds and stuff like that? And they're valid use and valid time for both of those, you know. So
100%. You know, there are times when I've had to use Superior because it just had the sound I needed. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So much effort. I like the ease of use. That's what thing I think, you know, Complete Kontrol kind of spoiled me. Ease of use. I know if I need to get a sound, how quick I can get to it.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, this is kind of a tip. When you eventually get your masses of sounds, and you will, because everybody does, one thing I love to do is I love to set all products, but I like to pick a particular type of sound. So I might pick, you know, for example, synth pad, and then I'll just go and load the synth pads. And because, as I say, it sorts everything into alphabetical order, you'll be bouncing from product to product, and you won't even know. And you'll come across sounds that you never even knew you had because you've never heard them before. And I have spent hours just doing that and going, where is this from? How did I not know I had this sound? What is that? And you know, it's so fascinating because when you're searching a particular product, normally you get a product, you might go through the sounds once and forget about it and move on. So one tip I just want to give people is when you start going down your exploratory pathways, it's a bit like a hedge maze in your garden. Try to forget all the things that you once thought about sound and browse in wholly different ways you've never been able to browse before. It will change your life. And I've started whole pieces because of this way of browsing.
Right. You found a sound that just inspired you to start playing something.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And that's
and it's nuts.
Generally what I do too when I'm like working on something. I was like, all right, I need a synth or something. I browse by the type of sound instead of the library and just go through the presets. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, this sound will fit what I'm working on. Because I'm primarily guitar, bass, and build a drum track, record guitar and bass. So for me, Complete Kontrol is more of a supplementary tool than say the tool that I build everything with. Whereas it's your main instrument, So, and it's interesting to see both of us use it in a very similar manner at times when we need to find the right sound for the job.
That's it, isn't it? But even you with maybe, fewer sounds, but not necessarily too many fewer, you still find things that you didn't even know you had. And it just can shock you into what?
Yep.
But again, if you're not using your favorites, you want to be using your favorites.
That's the one thing I haven't delved into yet. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not.
Do it, man.
Okay.
You will not regret it.
I'm going to look at that then. So
this is it. And
go ahead.
A couple other things. Yeah, Piano Tech. Piano Tech is an expensive purchase. I think it's around €800 or something, $700.
That's for like the full bundle. Yeah. You can start off, I think, with like Stage or something like that for like $150 or something, and add stuff over time as well too.
Wholly worth it though.
Yeah.
Because low CPU usage. It's a modeled piano as well. People should know this. It's a modeled piano, so you don't have any samples to download. The entirety of Piano Tech, when it's installed, is less than 100 megabytes for all of the pianos, right? And I've got Piano Tech, the studio here, the full bundle. Less than 100 megs. And there are, I forget how many pianos in there, like 20, 30 pianos.
Yeah.
Harpsichords, Rhodes patches as well. It's ridiculous. And you get a really great level of customizability, both through NKS and without, because they're using Juice.
Oh, okay.
So you can actually touch upon all that. You don't even need the Complete for this. You can do this in Logic.
Right. Piano Tech you can load up as an instrument, a software instrument in Logic, and still
Yes.
have a fair amount of accessibility to navigate just the plugin parameters without complete control.
This is also true of all the SWAM instruments now as well. All the SWAM instruments are now Juice accessible in Logic, also native NKS as well in Complete Control.
Nice. So you can use them either way.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good.
And more developers are slowly starting to do this, which is great.
Yeah.
It gives people options then, I think.
That's true. The issue I'm running into is with a lot of guitar amp sims that were using Juice, like you said, they're now becoming accessible. The issue I seem to run into 9 times out of 10 is that they're not labeled though. So it's like I can get to all the parameters, but I don't know which parameter does what.
That is accidental accessibility, isn't it? Because those people probably built with Juice version 6.1, which is the accessible version, and didn't know that they had done so. So they haven't labeled all the things. Right. Now, the SWAM people and the Pianotech people have built with Juice knowing that they were going to add accessibility. So they've labeled their things.
Right. Okay.
So what you need to do is go back to these manufacturers, the guitar people, and say, can you just label these controls, please? Because you've built with accessible Juice, but you haven't built it properly.
Right.
And they'll probably be, oh, sorry, we'll do that. Because labeling stuff is far easier than having to add lines of code in to make something work.
Right.
Juice did all that for you.
Right.
Just type labels into things.
So that's something, that's a good tip, because you may come across sims that are what Andre just called accidental accessible. So, feel free to reach out to those companies and see if they're willing to label stuff. Sometimes they may not know what you mean or know what needs to be done.
Make a screen capture video if you're on a Mac.
Yes.
Because then you can show people what you're talking about.
Yep.
They're like, oh, we didn't even know that we did that.
Yeah, exactly.
I've had conversations with people like that before. Wait, our product's accessible? What does that even mean? I'll show you.
Yes.
Wait, oh wow, okay. And then they go off and they become like completely invested in it, and you get some really good results that way. So it has happened in the past.
And unfortunately, there are going to be developers that are not interested in doing the extra work. That's the reality of the situation. But I think we should, reward the ones that are willing to do the work and purchase their products and support those companies as well. So,
yes, sir.
Anything else before you wrap up?
Anything else? Sounds like a Chinese order now. I want food. No, I think we're good. I mean, I think I covered all the things I could think of. Everything else is just sort of supplemental. You want this, you want that.
Right.
Like if you said to me, where do I get a good synth pad from? I'd say probably Expand very quick off the bat, or this Neo Sound Station.
Right.
If you said, where do I get some great strings from? Cheap but great strings. And I say cheap, by the way, because nothing orchestral is really cheap, right?
That is so true.
Oh, then the first thing I'm going to say is Project Sam Orchestral Essentials 1. Project Sam is a Dutch company that do great orchestral libraries that isn't Spitfire. And what they tend to do is great big ensemble patches. And you'll have heard Project Sam in pretty much every film that you've heard in the last 10 years as well, because they have really, really kind of industry standard noises. But their cheaper product is called Orchestral Essentials, and they've got 2 libraries in this range, 1 and 2, and they're usually about $100 and 50, 60 pounds, euros, dollars, I think. Not sure of the exact pricing, but Orchestral Essentials 1, I use it all the time, has one of the nicest string patches in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And I stack it with a piano, so I tend to stack it with Hammersmith 3 that we talked about earlier, and it's mod wheel controlled, so the strings do not respond to velocity. But you can dial up the power of the strings with the mod wheel, and it is one of the nicest string sounds in the world, if you ask me.
Okay.
Absolutely worth your time. Right. And native NKS because it's a Kontakt library. No, I shouldn't say it like that. Because it's a Kontakt library doesn't mean it's NKS ready. But this one happens to be a Kontakt library and NKS ready.
Right.
So get it.
And just one other thing to touch on, because we mentioned Pianotech was a model library, and MotoBase, I believe, is also a model-based library.
Yep, that's why it's called that.
Yeah, and so when something is a modeled library, that basically means it's algorithmic. Someone wrote code to emulate what these sounds should sound like and how they should feel and how they should behave. Whereas when it's a sample library, that's usually when it's using something like Kontakt. Kontakt is Native Instruments' version of, say, Sampler, which comes in Logic. It's a sampler. It loads. Someone had to go out and record, audio files of the different piano sounds, and then they use a sampler to string it together so that when you press keys, it comes out in a very realistic method. So sample libraries, the reason they're much, much bigger in size is because you have to include all the samples, all the actual audio files that you're hearing when you play your keys. And the different,
That's
right. round robins, basically means it's every time you play an E, it's not going to play the same exact E note. It's going to cycle through the 5 different or 10 different E notes that it has, so it doesn't just sound static and stale, and it sounds more realistic because, when you play a real piano, you never press the key the same way twice.
You do not. And actually, this leads me on to one of the best pianos, I think, in the world for not a lot of money. Embertone Walker 1955 is a concert Steinway D piano from 1955, of course, and it's under $200, and it is 200 gigs for the full package.
Library.
Now, it is 6 mic positions, but each of these things that you download is its own mic position. So if you wanted, for example, only the main microphones, I think they're $99 each instead, or something. I don't remember the exact pricing, so definitely don't quote me on this, but go to Embertone's website. And the reason I mentioned this as well, again, it's NKS already natively, it's Kontakt Library, and they're very good, and they respond very well. And also, Embertone is on Able Artist. So if you're an Able Artist user, you can get this for half price than the price I just quoted you.
And Able Artist, just to remind everyone, that's a separate website at ableartist.org, and they partner with different companies. So they verify that you're on some kind of disability income, and then if you want a product from one of their partner companies, you'll be able to get that product for 50% off. So that's definitely another site to check out and get signed up with if you're looking for a lot of these more expensive libraries. And then, as we stated earlier, plenty of inexpensive and or free libraries to get you into the game. And like I said, if you're doing a lot of modern contemporary music, you may not miss some of the more advanced,
esoteric,
yes,
in some ways,
features. But yeah, I did hear that piano you just mentioned, Embertone.
Yes, it is unbelievably good. A lot of libraries, you can't do that. You can't buy the mic position separately, but with this one you can.
Right.
So you combine that with the fact of Able Artist as well, you can get a silly deal on that thing. I think 6 different mic positions. They've got a binaural head position, hammers, wide mics, the main mics, room mics, and I think one other that I can't remember. So you get the sound that you like best on the website, or you can watch my video on it, because I did one. I showed all 6 of them in playing different passages.
And I imagine you can blend them together too.
You have to track stack them to do that, because it's not done in the interface. That's the thing. Because each thing is a separate download, completely separate download essentially, then there's no one interface to actually put them all together in software, as it were.
Right.
But you can track stack what you want.
Right. So you just basically load each of them as a separate Komplete Kontrol instance and a separate track in Logic, and then just throw them in the track stack. So
that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, when I got my massive M1 Max that I'm using to talk to you now, which was 64 gigs of RAM, I couldn't do this before. I loaded all 6 into one, and I wanted to play them all at once, and I did, and it just was crazy. It took about 6 minutes to load, and it was using 36 gigs of RAM.
Yeah, a note for anybody, and we should probably touch on this briefly, as far as what computer you might want to get if you're getting into this stuff. If you're not going to do a whole lot of sample library work or a whole lot of work with SoftSense, 16 gigs is probably going to be more than sufficient.
Oh, I gig with 16 gigs.
I
know that's a really, really silly statement. I gig with it, but it's true.
Yeah.
I've got an Intel MacBook Air 2020, and it's particularly Intel because I wanted Windows on it. So I could have got an M1 Mac, but I chose not to.
Right.
That stays at home. But my Intel MacBook Air is 16 gigs. It's a quad-core i7, and it works flawlessly on stage.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
But on stage, you're not loading more than one
Lots
sound
of
at a
sounds,
time. Exactly. You load.
But this is true for anybody going into this. If you want to do 5-10 tracks, you can do those 5-10 tracks.
Right.
Anything above that, you might run into a problem.
Yeah.
So just
and
be very careful.
If you're mostly audio and you do a little bit of MIDI, 16 gigs is plenty. If you want to get into loading orchestral libraries and doing some of these things where you have, every mic position or every part of the orchestra loaded on individual tracks and stuff like that, and these are sample libraries. Remember, we were talking earlier about the difference between a model library and a sample library. You're going to have to load all those samples into RAM, so that's where you might want the 32 gigs, 64 gigs of RAM.
Yes, absolutely.
And then, as Andre talked about earlier, it's better to have a lot of these on an external drive, because if you have a Mac with a 512 gigabyte internal drive, you're going to run out of space really quickly. So you want to get an external SSD, preferably an SSD for loading libraries, because it's just going to load a lot faster.
You touch on something so important here. Mechanical drives should not be used for loading libraries in the modern era.
Yes.
We're no longer in 2010, where this thing is okay. you definitely want an SSD.
Yes.
And what I would say is if you're a Mac owner, please don't buy Apple-priced SSDs internally. Like, I know a guy that has an 8 TB Mac.
I think we know the same guy.
And plugged them in externally. We know the same guy. What I did is I bought a 1 TB Mac and I have a 4 TB SSD. And the price of 4 TB was only £400 odd. Apple would charge me £2,000, I think, or £1,000 to go from 1 TB to 4 TB. Please don't do this to yourself.
Well, I will say one thing.
Mac, if possible. Yeah.
The one reason I will disagree with you on this one is it does load a lot faster off the internal SSDs.
I've tried it though, and it doesn't.
In my experience, it has. Okay, in my experience, it has.
I mean,
now,
I suppose it's because the SSD I'm using is a 10 gig instead of the old 5 gig SATA. I'm using the SanDisk now, so that is actually running over USB-C properly.
Right.
The old drive
the USB-C ones, and that's something to note too. The Samsung T7, the SanDisk equivalent of that, the ones that are proper USB-C, those are going to be a lot faster for sure.
Yes, those are good.
Yeah, those are definitely some good ones. I've noticed that I still find that with because I opted for the 2 terabyte option, and I still find that things do tend to load a little bit faster off the internal. But that being said, though, it's a budget dance. If money's no object, then and you don't want to have a bunch of external drives when you travel and you're gonna bring your laptop to work in different studios, different places, then obviously, put the 8 TB in there. But if I would, like Andre said, I probably wouldn't go less than a terabyte, but then get a big SSD, 3-4 terabyte SSD if you can, to load your libraries onto. And then
to be honest, though, having 8 TB in a computer scares me, particularly as it's soldered to the motherboard. I would never do that to myself.
Yeah. Understandable.
I mean,
that's understandable. Yeah, you got to figure out what your comfort level is. But the thing I was gonna say, no matter which option you go with, backup, and backup,
all the time.
All the time, because whether it's all internal or whether you have it on an external SSD, should something go wrong, should you lose that drive on the way to a gig or something like that, you want to know you have a backup that you can
never say that
from.
again in my presence.
Scary
it's
times. About the only thing that's probably more frightening is losing your iLock on the way to the gig. So.
Oh boy.
So yeah, backup is key. Whether it's all internal, whether you have external drives, definitely have some kind of backup solution. Now, for something like Time Machine, feel free to go mechanical drive. Feel free to go spin and drive.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's just get the biggest drive you can afford and just tell it to be a Time Machine drive and let it back up your entire system. There's obviously also online backup options. You just have to look at them to see which ones will let you back up your externals as well. Backblaze is really good about backing up everything that's plugged into your computer. So that's the one that I've used previously. Some of them will charge you extra for external drives. So you're just going to have to look at your different options out there to see what's going to work for online backup. But that's definitely, especially if you're going to invest in some of these libraries, you want to have a way to get it back that isn't going to every company's website and re-downloading everything.
That's a troublesome thing.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yes.
Don't do it. Now, actually, I was thinking, but you mentioned something really good here. Mm-hmm. You should do a Logic band bite size about the different licensing schemes between Native Access, iLock, Waves. Those are the 3 main ones I think people are probably
Plugin Alliance has their own. So yeah, most companies use iLock, but then some companies like Waves and Plugin Alliance and Native Instruments have their own licensing scheme. And
the NI one seems to be the least restrictive. I quite like it. 5 machines, no fuss.
Yeah.
Waves, 1 machine, 2 machines if you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
And iLock is 2 or 3.
I think iLock is now doing 2 by default. So anything that uses iLock, I think you now get 2 licenses for. And then Plugin Alliance is free by default. So you can use it up to free machines. So like you said, NI is probably the most user-friendly. Plugin Alliance being the second, and then iLock, and then Waves for your first year. You get 2 licenses, and then after that, you have to keep paying the upgrade fee if you want the second license and latest versions, and et cetera, et cetera. So, like we said, Waves is a rabbit hole to be very careful with. So,
genuinely.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we covered a lot today.
What a chat.
So, where can people find you? Tell us about some of the music stuff that you have out there, that you have available. And where can they keep up with you as well, Andre?
Come on over to YouTube. I don't know if it'd be presumptuous to say link in description, but hopefully
it's not presumptuous
that's
at all.
Probably find me.
There's going to be a lot of links in the description
for this one, and you'll find me on the old Twitters as well. And I just released a project actually. Depending on when you hear this as well, there's one single out at the time of recording. There's another single coming out on April 22nd. I'm working with a drum and bass producer who lives upstairs from me. We have been living upstairs from each other for 6 years. And we never knew. And last September we met in a kind of freak way because we had a noisy neighbor and we both complained about the noisy neighbor. And as a result, he's like, I'm a musician, let's talk, let's make music. He found my YouTube channel and we got making music together. So nice. I've been working with this drum and bass producer and been using Komplete for 9/10 of it. I'm actually doing some finger drumming on it too at 174 BPM, which is tough stuff using addictive drums, by the way. Right, and I don't.
My right hand just kind of cramped just thinking about that.
In the thought of it, yeah, it was a bit crazy to do it, but I did it.
As someone that can alt pick very fast on the guitar, I'm trying to think of doing finger drumming at that speed, and it's just like, yeah.
I should go do a little video about that. I should.
Yeah, you should.
It's scary business. You should. But I tell you about it. It's so fun. So there's that. It's coming out. If you watch this after May the 6th, then the full album is out. So you'll be able to listen to that. It's called Kilburn, which is the place we live.
So at May 6, 2022 is when the full album comes out. What's the name of the project and the album again?
The name of the album is called Kilburn, and it's going to be with the drum and bass producer called Zero T. So the word zero and then space letter T.
Gotcha. So it's going to be Zero T featuring ONJ or Andre?
It's ampersand.
Okay, I got you.
Zero T and ONJ. That's my stage name, by the way. For people who don't know, I've gone by Onge for years. It's kind of short for Andre, onomatopoeia type style. And that's who I be.
Okay.
You find me that way.
And then you have some other music stuff out there too, I believe. Some of your more jazz, chill out stuff.
There's a bunch of any music streaming service that you'd care to mention. Even, I just found out recently, Qobuz, of all places. You can find some of my stuff there, and Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff.
And
is that throw my normal name in?
Okay. So for that stuff, look under Andre Louis, and then
Andre Louis, yeah.
For the Zero T stuff, it's Zero T and ONJ.
ONJ, you'll find that. And then, my channel is a bit like Steve's, where we kind of cover different things. I have a whole playlist up there called Inspired by Sound, where I tend to break down sort of my tracks, musical autopsies of my stuff. And particularly the reason I do this as well is because I often end up using a ton of Komplete libraries. And oftentimes people ask, what did I use in XYZ? I said, I've got a video that shows that.
Right.
Now, a lot of the time in the video description, like you, Steve, I think a lot of YouTubers become very lazy. They don't write anything in the descriptions, and I hate it.
Yeah.
So I've watched some killer videos in the past, and I go to look at the description, just assuming.
And it's like nothing.
Links, it's empty. It's all about Patreon.
Yep.
What about what you used? But for me, anytime I use a plugin in a thing, whether it's an effect or an instrument, it's linked in the description. So come over to Inspired by Sound. If you're a Logic Band aficionado, you'll know all about Logic Band and stuff. Come over this way too. Got a lot to share with you.
Yep.
And Steve and I are great friends. We're not in competition.
Yeah,
so,
he's definitely more into the Komplete Kontrol. Like he said, he has the Inspired by Sound playlist. So if you want to hear some of these libraries we talked about in action, get some coffee, get some popcorn, and set some time aside and check that playlist out. He also goes over a lot of the stuff we talked about today about setting up different aspects of Komplete Kontrol and stuff like that. I believe you have a Komplete Kontrol playlist on there as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. There is one there, yes. So anytime that there's a major Komplete update, I'll cover it in the playlist, and I'll show you the new functions and features, so you can kind of see the progression of Komplete from, I wouldn't say the early days, because I wasn't doing that in 2016, but I started the channel really in 2017 in earnest, and you can sort of see some of the progression of Komplete as we've grown up a little bit. So, yeah, come over and enjoy the sounds.
Yep. So, that's that. If you're into hearing examples of these sounds, you want to see more about Komplete Kontrol in action, Andre's channel is a good place to go. And there's also the resources. You mentioned the Komplete Kontrol Dropbox. That's one resource.
Yes, we mustn't forget Chris Ankin, kk-access.com. Wonderful write-ups that he does as well.
Yep,
because he takes you through every knob and every control on every page of a plugin that he's reviewing, and he does a great job with that too.
So that's a good place to go for written reviews of Komplete Kontrol
from a blind person's perspective, we should add.
And I think that's the site I used when I got my M32, and I looked at their getting started guide and got set up there as well too. There's a mailing list and WhatsApp as well, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. We've got both. Chris runs the mailing list, and I sort of run the WhatsApp group as well. So there's a lot of resources out there to help you, along with the NI forum. Losing my voice now. I need to drink a water. But the thing is, it's not in front of me because it's not in case ready, so it doesn't help. I'm actually going to have to go get it like a savage from the kitchen. But yeah, so there's a lot of resources out there, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch as well. Twitter and Facebook. Any of my videos, you can find that information at the bottom of every video. Boilerplate text. It's very boring, but you got to have it.
Yeah. So if you get in touch with Andre, I'm sure he can get you pointed over to the mailing list and get you pointed over to the WhatsApp group if you want to get into that. We'll try to get a link to the Dropbox in the description so you can browse that. And if you want to join the Dropbox, get on the mailing list or the WhatsApp group, and someone can get your email.
Drop us a line. Stephen can do it. I can do it. Can't we? Can sort of like.
So yep. So any other resources we should touch on before we get out of here?
There's going to be one, and I'll be waking up at 3 a.m. going, I forgot. But no.
If you remember, let me know, and I'll put it in. I'll at least put it in the description. So,
in the description. Yeah. Those can be edited.
Yes.
It's hard to redo this.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah.
So yeah, if you remember anything else, let me know. This has been awesome, man. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while. Just get people who know particular subjects really, really well and get them on here and just deep dive, because a lot of people, because of how well Komplete Kontrol integrates with Logic, do ask questions about Komplete Kontrol.
And boy, does it integrate well.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes. So, it's one of those things where I didn't know all the answers, and, you're kind of one of the people I go to on that topic. So, just wanted to have a conversation with you and just get some more information out there for people. So thank you so much for doing this. We'll have to cross the bridge, and I'll come over on your channel and do something with you one of these days.
Let's do that.
It's been awesome. This has exceeded my expectations, so thank you so much again for doing it.
Mine too. It was great fun.
Check out Andre's channel. There'll be a link to that. Go subscribe to his channel if you haven't as yet. Subscribe to this, because we're going to have a lot more stuff coming up about even some of the Logic sims and just other things as blind musicians that we can do to improve our skills and to earn money. As Andre said, if you're doing something to earn a living with these tools, it covers the expense of these tools, and it becomes a business expense at that point. So that's definitely something I want to cover more, is the different ways we can monetize our skills as blind users using these tools. So if you want to see more stuff like that, let me know in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe. Spread the word with this video so more people know what we have access to, what we can use, what we can do. That's it for this one, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, or listening in the case of this particular video. And as always, until next time, happy recording.